Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
Welcome, everyone, to Grateful Goddesses, and thank you so much for joining us today. Whether you are listening to the podcast, watching the YouTube, or reading the blog, we are so glad that you are here. Today, we are honored to be speaking to Jenn Kennedy. In her private practice, she specializes in sex and gender. That translates to sex therapy, both for individuals and couples. Sex addiction, compulsion, issues with porn, infidelity, prostitution, and LGBT. With these specialties, she has an interesting mix of clients. Recently, her practice has expanded to those looking for more sexual satisfaction and who are also recovering from childhood sexual abuse. She's a certified sex addiction therapist, trained in EMDR, and she works in a variety of modalities depending on the presenting issue and the disposition of the client. She is currently working on a PhD in clinical sexology. She has taught intimate relationships, couples work, and human sexuality in the graduate school at Antioch University, Santa Barbara. Her practice is called Riviera Therapy, and under this umbrella, she supervises 3 up-and-coming clinicians who are interested in sex therapy, couples work, and sex addiction specializations. Thank you so much for joining us, Jenn, to Grateful Goddesses.
Well, hi there. Thank you for having me.
Hi, we have so much to cover with this topic. You have quite an umbrella of what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you entered into this profession?
Yeah, sure. I know it is a broad range. Part of that is me being in a small town, so I get to sort of have these specializations because, you know, we have fewer people that need more services. So, so I went back to graduate school kind of late when I was 40, and I definitely knew I was going into it because I wanted to work with couples. That was my focus, and a natural outgrowth of working with couples is sex. You know, couples often come in with issues around sex and sexuality. So that became kind of a hyper specialization that I just really gravitated to, and that most clinicians seem to sort of shy away from. So it's been a really rewarding choice. Yeah, there's a great need for it.
There is a great need for it. And especially too, with what's people are coming out more, it seems, and identifying, feeling comfortable just saying, you know, who they are, and if they were born a certain way and then deciding, no, you know, that's not how I feel, that's not who I am. So I'm curious, and we're curious, the goddesses, about your work with LGBT.
Sure. Yeah, that has been a long journey. I have, you know, I lived in LA for 20 years. I would say I was an activist light. I grew up in the 90s and, you know, early 2000s, around the community, in the community. And there's just always had I've always kind of had an interest and a soft spot too for those folks because they're underserved. And more recently, I'm definitely seeing an uptick in trans clients coming in, looking for support at all ages, actually. Initially, it was more youth, but I'm seeing people throughout the lifespan coming in.
Do you think that wasn't as available and it's just becoming more available in the recent years with sex therapy? And why do you think that's so?
I think there just isn't a lot of competency specifically for the trans folks. People don't have that lived experience. Many clinicians do not. The training wasn't very available, and it's getting better. As more visibility happens, as more competency happens, and clinicians choose to actively go get experience outside of their lived experience, I think is really valuable. But yeah, historically that section just got very little representation and support.
For people that are in a different age, like the older generation, for example, grandparents, I've just heard personal stories of grandparents having a hard time switching pronouns because they're very set on, my granddaughter, my grandson. It's very hard to say they for that generation, at least the people I've come in contact with on a personal level. So what are your suggestions for, our society in general? Of course, we want to respect. I find this difficult to say. We want to respect how a person feels and how they would like to be identified. If there's, though, this societal, like I'm talking more about an older generation that's struggling to talk that way, then how can we help support the individual who is trans to deal with this type of situation?
Yeah, I think it's supporting both of them, really. It is it takes some time. I was going to say it's a transition, but it's a transition of using a pronoun. I don't know if you've ever had a friend that suddenly went by a nickname, and you're like, or they went off to college and they came back with a different name. Even that's hard to get used to. Pronouns have been a little bit prickly and challenging, not just for the older generation, but parents too. Sometimes peers, but younger folks tend to just sort of see the world less binary, so they're more skilled at navigating that. I think, like most things, it takes focus, it takes intention, and when you look at a person for who they are, it starts to get easier, because if you're really focused on how they identify, it just starts to kind of click in, and then that's the way you see them. But it requires some willingness, because the pushback that I see is typically like, that doesn't make sense to me, or I shouldn't have to, or this doesn't feel like my job. And I think if you're going to love somebody, if you're going to be in someone's life, I think that's a fair, reasonable request to get their pronouns right.
I absolutely agree with you. I just know of people that are having a hard time. In fact, the professor Jordan Peterson in Toronto, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He refused to call an individual in his class by the chosen pronoun that person asked for, and he was very adamant on saying, no, we shouldn't have to change. That's his opinion, but there was quite a pushback to him as well. What do you mean? Like, you need to respect a person of how they choose to be called. If they want to, if their name changes, you're going to call them by their new name. So it's the same as the pronoun. So lots and lots of questions to dive into. And thank you so much for being patient with us, because I don't want our listeners and viewers to feel like there isn't a question that can't be answered, or to feel badly about asking questions and to feel judged by asking questions. Because I know you and I had a conversation before this interview, and I was asking you different things I felt really, really ignorant about. And I said, look, I just want to know, so I know how, to move forward with a lot of different topics with sex. So let's not be scared, and let's just ask these questions. So let's bring on our featured goddesses to join us in this discussion with Jenn. So Camille, what would you like to ask Jenn today?
Wow. So there's so many different things to unpack. And when I was hearing you use the example about changing names and so on, I remember I went through a phase where I tried to change my name and it didn't really catch on. But I feel like with this, there's so much more to that, because when it comes to gender, and even like with gender reveal parties, there's so much more to that, because people have like their own expectations and envisions or stereotypes and so on. And I think that while we have you here, it's a great opportunity for you to maybe share a little bit more on how people can really try to see people where they are, not what their expectations are, their stereotypes, or their own phobias or isms, as it may be, getting in the way.
Yeah, I think the gender reveal, it's one of those situations where right from the beginning, as soon as the bump starts to appear, people say, what is it? What is it? Is it a girl or is it a boy? It's like there's no room in our consciousness for it's both or it's neither, or, we're not sure, or we're going to just let it decide as it grows up. It's like from the beginning, we're projecting is what you're describing, right? We have expectations, so we project them onto others. And parents do this all the time, right? I expect you to be this and this and this, including what it means, what we've assigned culturally to be a girl or a boy. And so there's more, I think, permission to have a range, especially when you're born medically female, to have a range of presentations. Boys don't usually get to have as much range. But if we can start to, we've all known tomboys, or, we've known people with like sort of a range of presentations. If we can just start to have a little more allowance, I guess, for difference, and for people to look or act or dress in ways that aren't typically what you'd see, because that's just who we are.
Right. And I would love to piggyback on that, where there's recently there's a movement going on over in the UK over I'm sure I'm going to mess up her name because there's so many names at this point of women that have been attacked, where they're making a point of really trying to center the conversation on putting it on male violence as opposed to always putting it on women being the victims. And it's our cross to bear as far as what was she wearing, what was she doing, just to add to that gender element of it, where as much as we kind of have these expectations, that sometimes being able to live in those expectations too, of maybe owning your femininity, being able to walk at night safely and not worry about the over toxic masculine energy that's following you, maybe the footsteps or whatever. So can you speak also a little bit more about that as well? How people are handling that, especially now in the pandemic and so on. I know there's been a rise.
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand your question. So it's kind of more from the standpoint of the responsibility of women, and typically that women hold to keep themselves safe and to not be too attractive or too, or like she caused it by the way she looked or the way she dressed. Yikes. That always makes me cringe.
What was she drinking?
Right. Well, this also, I hate to say it, but this goes back to, I think some biblical stuff about, women taunting men and inviting men. And, I think it's the man's responsibility to manage himself. Really. I think that, yes, we all send signals, and there's lots of signals that are nonverbal, right? Of course, what we wear, and of course, how we speak and how we behave is part of it. But I think the responsibility has to be shared. And I don't think anyone deserves victimization. I think consensuality is incredibly important. And regardless of what she chose to wear or how much she drank, I think maybe, he still needs to have consent. And I think that gets lost when blame starts to get assigned. Yeah.
Right. I was thinking also like how we raise our children so differently, in the sense of women are automatically raised to be empathetic, and those expectations with the gender reveal and all of that kind of leading to right now, like that same, now we're trying to flip that narrative.
Well, women are raised to be accommodating. They're raised to be pleasing. They're raised to be flirtatious and desirable and attractive, but not too attractive. We want you to be sexy. This is the Madonna whore problem, right? Like we want you to be attractive enough to want to have sex with you, but we don't want anyone else to have sex with you. But we want you to appear like you're pure and clean. We get a lot of mixed messages, especially in the United States, in this culture. The advertising is very, very sexy. Porn is very, very sexy. But then you're supposed to women are also expected to have a certain amount of manner and appropriateness, and it's a fine line to walk.
I personally experienced, I was at a bar with some girlfriends, and we were just, I'm happily married of almost 30 years, but we were just having fun and drinking and dancing, and the power went out in the bar. So it was dark, and we were just still dancing, and I had this gentleman just think that I was dancing with at the bar. We were just all dancing all together, and I guess he thought he could do this, and he gave me a real good pinch underneath, and I remember feeling like I didn't know what to do. I just was like, what? And he was laughing like, oh, it's all in good fun. And I was like, we're out of here. And I grabbed my friends and we left. And in the cab ride home, I was like, what did I do to deserve that? How did that happen? What did I do? Like, what did I maybe flirt too hard? Or like, we were just having fun. So I totally agree with you that it was my space. He should not have invaded it. Maybe I should have turned around and slapped him. I don't know. Like, I feel
But in that moment, it's tricky, right?
Very tricky.
Yeah. And this is also the dynamic that sometimes plays out. I mean, it's so interesting with sex therapy, right? Is that people have to come in and say, this is what's not working. This is the person I'm afraid to be, or this is what I actually feel, or this is what I don't feel and I want to feel. And so there's so many messages out in the ether and in the universe. And then when you're trying to be with an intimate partner, it's quite confusing. It's all mixed up,
Michelle, what would you like to add?
Hi, Jen. Well, I want to go back to the LGBTQ component. And I'm hoping that maybe you can clear up some misconceptions about people who are, and I think they're misconceptions, about people who are trans, and how I think people automatically think that has to do with their sexual preference. I don't believe that it does. I mean, I'm sure maybe in some cases, but I don't believe that it does, but people seem to automatically go there. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's so confusing for people. I think we had actually talked about this, Karen, in our original call, is that there's the acronyms now are SOGIs, sexual orientation and gender identity. They're two different things.
Yeah.
Right. So the sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. The gender identity is what you feel like. So your trans identity, say you were born biologically female, medically female, and you've transitioned to male. So you are male, but who you're attracted to is a totally different thing. That's not your body. That's, sort of your heart and like your mind. So who are you drawn to? So it doesn't matter what's happening over here. It doesn't influence over here. So that's what's really confusing to people. And the other thing that gets confusing is queer now is the catch-all for all of it, right? So if you're L, G, B, or T, and that T can include non-binary, meaning you don't see yourself as male or female, or fluid, you kind of transition back and forth. You're sort of some days more this and some days more that. Queer is the catch-all. If you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're bisexual, if you're questioning, if you're trans. So that's, people sort of conflate the two. And I can see how, it gets confusing, but yeah, there really is a distinction. So you have to ask. You can't assume just because somebody is a trans male that they're going to be gay or straight, Yeah.
Absolutely. On that note, I heard you just say it now, and I heard it in the bio. You just say LGBT. So what's your thought on, because I know people who identify as queer. So are you saying that that's no longer, a useful term, or you're just it was just the way?
No, it is. No. Queer is re-emerging, because if you're over like 45, you also kind of like get a little nervous when you hear the word queer, right? Because queer was like a slur. It was not a compliment. It was, but it's been reclaimed, and so it's a catch-all for the whole community. But when somebody says they're queer, that doesn't tell you everything, because are they queer? Are they queer in the way that they're bisexual? Are they queer in the fact that they're trans? Are they queer because they're a lesbian? You don't know. So queer is the catch-all, and the youth are using it a ton. So get ready. Get ready.
Well, and
I
that's not an issue.
Well, I was going to also say, I think it's also depends on where you are, because where I live, it's questioning. It's not queer for the Q.
I didn't know that.
Well, the Q is queer or questioning. Yeah. And there's intersex and there's ally. And
so I have a question. I am heterosexual, but I think the women's body is beautiful. And I love looking at the women's body. I do. Does that mean, what does that mean? I'm not attracted sexually, but I think that women are beautiful. So
We are.
I think that you're a human. I think that's actually an honest perspective. And just because someone is gay doesn't mean they're attracted to everyone male. A man doesn't mean, you can appreciate the beauty of a person without objectifying, without sexualizing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I've talked to teen girls about that as well. And I had someone approach me that asked me that, and she herself was questioning, well, am I gay? I'm not sure. And I said, well, I was trying to work her through it. And I said, well, I also love the female body. So, and I don't feel like I want, I'm attracted that I want to go have sex with a female, but maybe one, I'm not, I'm very happily married, but
attraction is a funny thing though. I think, that's what's always confusing to people when, say, like a woman leaves her husband and comes out at 40 or 30 or something, right. And they're like, what? Yeah. Attraction is a funny thing. It's sort of like, yes, some people feel it really young, and they know when they're 12, or they know when they're 18, and they're off to college, and then they're or they're experimenting. Some people, it's about the person they meet along the way, and then suddenly they're just feeling those tingly feelings, and they're like, oh, I kind of want to make out, and that's, they can't really go the whole distance initially in their mind, because that just doesn't even translate as an option. But I've seen all kinds of things, and I actually think most people are a little more on the range of some flavor of bisexuality than not. I don't think most people are on the strict ends of binary of straight.
It's fluid, like you said. And I think that the advice that I gave to this individual was, go with your heart. Like, if you're attracted to someone of the same sex, and you love spending time with that person, and they happen to be the same sex as you, then go with it. But if not, then, I think it's just really about your heart. Michelle?
On the flip side, I'm single. I was on a date a little while ago, a few months ago, and we were, being in San Diego, we were at the beach, and, having, I don't know, a meal, sitting at a table, and it was our first date, and he kept pointing out men to me who were shirtless, because maybe they were surfing or just in a bathing suit, going, wow, look at his body. Wow, look at his body. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think he's with the right person on the date.
Or maybe he was feeling a little insecure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
If there were girls walking around in bikinis like everywhere, you might be like, whoa.
Yeah, it was sort of good for him. I have no problem with that, but I wasn't interested anyway, which made it easier. But maybe it was the same thing though. Maybe he was just somebody, like Karen just said, who just, maybe it was interesting.
You have no idea what's going through people's minds. I hear the craziest things on the regular, and I'm like, wow, okay, all right, let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, you listen, and I wanted to transition now to a new topic of sexual addiction, because you do work with sexual addiction, and I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah.
Share with us, it's a very tricky area, because some people are definitely, yes, it's an addiction. It's not just someone being unfaithful. And some people are thinking it's totally wrong. And how could a person do that? So I'm just curious what your thoughts are and how you handle sexual addiction when clients come to you, either the person who has the addiction or the partner that doesn't.
Sure. Yeah. So I see both. Some therapists usually specialize in one or the other, but again, in a smaller market, I do both. So the other thing is, I know a lot of people kind of like recoil at the word addiction. So compulsion, is sort of another way to frame it. Even if that's going on, I'm never giving permission for the bad behavior. I just want to say that from the outset. But there's there's a distinction between like, hey, I like hooking up a lot, or hey, you know, I like watching some porn, and I'm an addict. Like there's a big gap there, and there's some criteria that we're looking at that really does compare to, it matches the criteria that we look at for substance use disorder or, you know, substance addiction. It looks like a lot of impulsivity, compulsivity, doing it even though there's been consequences, like people in your family are saying, please stop, this is hurting me. You know, it's the risk taking, it's the increased, so what we call tolerance. So what used to work doesn't work anymore. You have to kind of escalate and do more. You know, and it starts to look like a pattern of behavior that's problematic and that's out of control. So it's one thing, you know, if somebody likes to watch porn on occasion, or it's one thing if, especially, you know, I see a lot of young adults in their 20s just dating around, sleeping around, having a lot of like ambiguity. I don't worry, I don't bristle at that. When it starts to be, first of all, if the young adults are coming in, male are coming in with erectile dysfunction, that's a flag for me that says, how much porn are you watching? You know, because that's usually taking you there. With older men, you know, kind of there's different profiles. With the men that are having lots of affairs or are seeking escorts, again, if they're not in a relationship and that's just how they date, I don't care. But if they are in a committed relationship and they're lying, you know, I'm fine with polyamory if you negotiate that. But if you're lying, if there's secrecy, if you're sneaking around, if you're taking, you know, doing risky behavior, that starts to look different. And so that's when I'm like, okay, like, help me unpack this. What are you doing? How long have you been doing it? What's at risk here? How much are you spending? You know, like we kind of look at the whole profile of that. How much damage has it caused? Because usually, unfortunately, these people do not present until there's consequences. Like they don't usually come in and say, I want to stop. So the consequences will be erectile dysfunction. It'll be their wife just found everything on their computer. It'll be they're getting blackmailed because of something. You know, there's consequences. And so they're in a little bit of a crisis when they come in. And that's creating some motivation to change.
And how do you help the individual the partner that's on the other end?
So if the partner, and sometimes I see the addict, sometimes I see the partner, and sometimes I see the couple. Depends on kind of who's referred to me. When I'm helping the partner, it's a very different approach. It kind of looks like PTSD, honestly. She feels crazy sometimes. She looks a little crazy because she's riled up. She has been probably gaslit quite a bit, like what you're thinking isn't true, you know, what you think is happening isn't happening when it really is. She probably hasn't had a lot of closeness and genuine partnership in quite a while. You know, it's just she's in a more shell-shocked, vigilant, you know, really like looking for things, a lot of times being like a sleuth. It's a painful position. So that's more on the trauma reduction, you know, helping them orientate like themselves and going forward, create a, you know, plan, create safety, create expectations. It's a whole different way of working.
And you say does it not happen the reverse?
It does, but not very often. And I don't think I've ever worked with a male partner, come to think of it. I've worked with a few women who are addicts, who are having affairs, but I have never seen a male partner, now that I think about that. Yeah. But they do exist, of course.
Camille or Michelle, do you have any questions on that topic at all?
I think I can't help but wonder, it's more a statement, there's probably a little more shame with a male, the person whose wife is having the affairs and who's addicted. There's maybe perhaps you don't see clients, or I'm wondering, who are going through trauma because maybe, you know, people feel ashamed to be that quote unquote victim or whatever. It's interesting. But I do. Sorry.
The partners react so different. No, the partner reaction is all across the board. Sometimes it's rage. They're coming in with like guns blazing, you know, and they really want to get into it and hold this person accountable and be very punitive. And sometimes they are just so devastated and so wounded. So it really is quite a range of, presentation.
And here's my other quick question. How do you help, let's say, women get past that trauma? I know you do EMDR, which I happen to think is a phenomenal thing. I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the other ways that you would help people get past the trauma? Because I think it is trauma.
So there's this process that we're trained to do called disclosure that oftentimes we work toward if the addict is willing. So that's part of it too, is if there's too much damage and the couple's blowing apart, that's one thing. But if they're going to try to make a go at this and do some repair and maybe move forward together, then I really do recommend disclosure with CSAT, Certified Sex Addiction Therapist. It's a process where we prep both partners. We come together. It's kind of brutal. It's like you basically, the four of you, because each person has their own therapist. And then the addict prepares a document that's usually quite lengthy that basically discloses everything they've ever done. Everything. And it's very detailed. So the partner has all the information and it's contained and they know it. And then they can decide going forward, can I move forward with this person? So that's sort of the beginning. But we do a lot of grounding first. We do a lot of resourcing first, because that's a hard thing to handle, a hard thing to hear. But it's a lot of, it's definitely the trauma reduction. It's also just creating ways to feel safe again. Some of that is relational, with the partner in terms of, can I check your phone? Can I have location services on so I know where you are? Are you being really consistent and following through on where you say you're going to be when? You know what I mean? Like just all that stuff so it starts to feel like I do know what's going on here.
And what about for the woman who doesn't stay with that partner and now they're on their own and they're trying to, they've maybe done a little healing, but they're trying to find love. What would you, but they're still struggling. They still feel the trauma. How would it be any different?
Yeah, it's different because the source of the hurt is no longer their partner, and yet there's that residual concern and vigilance. So it's a slow process. I would say getting to know a new person, go slow and, kind of trust your gut. Women sometimes don't trust their gut in these moments. Trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, something's not right. Look for somebody who can be, transparency is important. Not that we need to know every single thing about our partners, but there should be a certain level of transparency that feels available. And just be aware of sort of how you might be triggered, I guess. And also, I don't think you need to tell your whole history to a new person, but like have some awareness that this is where it's coming from. It's not that I don't trust you, it's that I don't trust,
Yeah.
and you're part of that. So you need, ideally you would give me a little extra safety along the way.
Well, does that lead into women or men who had suffered sexual abuse, how they're coping and dealing? Is that how you work with them as well, to trust again?
So, gosh, yeah, that I just have so much respect for that population. I've worked with both men and women who had childhood sexual abuse, and intimacy. I will also say for the sex addict, honestly, intimacy is difficult. Intimacy being close, sustained, honest relationship with somebody. They don't know how to do it very well. And with childhood sexual abuse, typically there is definitely a distancing. There is definitely there's issues about power and control, of course. There are issues of self-worth that typically come up. So EMDR can be really powerful with repairing some of those negative cognitions about worth, about safety, about.
Can you explain to the listeners what EMDR
Oh, sure.
is?
Yeah, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a trauma protocol that we do. It was originally developed for veterans, but we've adapted it, and it works really well with especially with specific traumas, but in general, these negative cognitions we have. So it's a bilateral stimulation, and clinicians do it in different ways. There's a light bar. The traditional way was with the fingers going back and forth and following the eyes. I use these buzzers. You can also do it online. Actually, clinicians are now trained to do it even online. So you could probably find somebody that does that. But the basic idea is that in the past, painful situations were maladaptively processed. It was too scary, too intense in the moment, and your brain kind of couldn't handle it all. So it sort of short circuited it and just kind of put it in there. And every time you think about it, you get that like ugh feeling. Mm-hmm. So with this process, we kind of take you back. It's a bit of exposure therapy. We take you back to the painful incident, but we're keeping you regulated through breath. So you're taking, some nice deep breaths along the way. You're also getting the bilateral stimulation. It's feels a little like hypnosis. And eventually it takes the charge out of the former situation. It works incredibly well for some people. So it can be a nice, efficient way to lower that distress. You don't forget anything that's happened, but it just doesn't hold that same like charge that it used to. So
it sounds like effective.
It definitely works well.
Yeah, I've actually done it too. And I didn't feel it helped me. I wasn't sexually abused. It was something else I was dealing with, but I found it didn't quite work for me, but I feel like it definitely can. It's something that people should try if they have access to it, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen most people it helps a little, at least. Some people it helps remarkably, like they will completely clear a memory in a single session. It's incredible. Most people it takes longer than that, but they'll see some improvement.
So now let's talk about sexual drive. And as we women get older and drier, and gravity steps in, and so sexual drive for women. Can you talk about that? Like, is it true that women reach their sexual peak in their 40s and men? Oh yeah,
I have clients all along the lifespan. I've got women in their 50s, 60s. Actually, I even have clients in their early 70s who are still having good sex. I will say, of course, postmenopausal women, the skin gets thinner, it gets drier, the sex drive tends to reduce, menopause being usually around late 40s. But it doesn't have to stop. I think what's interesting is that that label of like women hit their sexual peak in their 40s, that is correlated also to us knowing our bodies better, us hopefully having more confidence. Like we know what turns us on, we know the positions we need, we care, we attach less to some of the superficial stuff that was really important to us in our 20s, and so we get it done, we get what we need, if we decide so. I think it's not like the body is physically so different at 40. I think the mind is different at 40. And so it allows the body to do its thing.
Yeah, I think I agree. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. I think our focus changes too. Like we have kids at 40, so like we just have other things we're doing. We're running businesses. So sex may not be as important as it used to be. And also like media doesn't really show women over 40 being sexy and sexual. Like it's almost as if we die in Hollywood and come back as the Golden Girls. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're not, even the husbands aren't seeing us as sexy images on TV anymore. And you're like, wait, I'm still hot in my 40s. And so I wonder if that plays into it and how gender roles play into it beyond porn, like just in TV in general, how they kind of set women up to think that once you hit 40, everything goes downhill.
Michelle, what were you going to say?
I'm smiling because I'm 56 and I feel so I've been single for 2 years, and I gotta say I would like to use the word sensual. My sex drive is probably better than it was when I was married because I wasn't happy. That's at least what I think. But I do know, like, the drive is there, but sometimes, there's stress or still perhaps, trauma from my past relationship, and that gets in the way of a great sexual experience a little bit, but
blood flow is also reduced. So that sometimes makes
ah,
women have, I'd say women over 45 or 50 have a little more challenge sometimes reaching orgasm.
well, yeah, like I'm still waiting just for like amazing sex. I'm just going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But the drive is there, and the experiences are fine. But, so would
Mm-hmm.
you attribute that to menopause? Like I'm postmenopausal.
Well, it depends
I
on
may not want this aired.
how it depends. No, it depends on how you define amazing sex. I mean, um, is it about you mentioned sensuality, which I love, right? It's not just like, is it good sex or bad sex? Like, what constitutes that?
Yeah.
Is it the energy? Is it the slow lovemaking? Is it the fiery? Is it the technique? Is it the willingness to spend a little more time with your clitoris? Which hopefully a good lover knows how to do.
I think
If that's what you
everyone needs
like.
to spend a little more time with the clitoris.
I got to say though,
Dare
men
you?
aren't, in my very limited experience, men aren't so good there. Like it's
Yeah.
funny to me.
Yeah,
Speak for
they need
yourself.
some.
And frustrating.
My husband is 6 years younger, and I'm very appreciative of the millennials. I don't know what they taught them, but I'm very appreciative.
And this sometimes is about teaching your partner.
Yes.
Like, this is what I like. Newsflash. And this is the stuff we talk about in sex therapy all the time. It's like, I actually typically will, if they come in for sex therapy, I will see them like usually once or twice, and then I separate the couple. In the next session or 2 sessions are individual with them, because I want to get a full history intake. How did you grow up? What messages did you get? How does religion or, location, in terms of social location, affect your sexual self? What were your early experiences like? Do you like your body? Do you have orgasms? Do you masturbate? Like, like just all that stuff. What would you like to be doing with your partner that you are afraid to ask for? Like, if you had, and then we all get back together, and then I like try to bring it all in. Because if you're like, oh God, my partner doesn't know how to give me, an orgasm, or he neglects my clitoris, it's like, okay, well, let's talk about this. And I've got a book I can give him, actually, that's all about that. Or I've got a bunch of books, I've got a bunch of resources, and I'll say it all out loud, and they're kind of embarrassed, but they're so grateful at the same time, because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about this.
Well, lube is our friend.
Lube is our friend.
Lube is a very good friend. And other sexual aids, or we were talking too about sometimes taking edibles, if you're allowed to do that, or drinking. Are those good things? Are they not? Sex toys, all of those support systems. What do you think?
I say yes, as long as, it doesn't feel excessive. I've seen excess on everything. Glass of wine is fine. I think toys could be great. There are tons of studies that show women. I actually was just reading something yesterday. I'm working on my dissertation right now, and it was looking at different stimulation to bring a woman to orgasm, and like still pictures, man, like I was actually kind of surprised, because listening to narratives through headphones, low, what got to high was vibration. So using a vibrator of any kind was like, bam. And partner, good partner interaction also took her. So she didn't respond to porn in the way he did. She didn't respond to still pictures in the way he did. But women, so toys can be really helpful. And that can look like a vibrator, that can look like anal play, that can look like, putting a little vibrating cock ring on him so he gets a little bit and she gets it. This is assuming we're talking about heterosexual sex. I see a lot of couples that have erectile dysfunction going on, and they act like it's the end of the world. And I'm like, you still have a mouth, like you still have fingers. duh, like, hello.
You sound like my husband when it's that time of the month. He's like, you still have other places.
We talked about that, Camille. We're like, yeah,
Yeah, but they're all sore.
right?
No offense, but I mean, I have a very angry vagina during that time. Because I have endometriosis, fibroids, and pelvic floor dysfunction, just to put it all out there. But at the same time, I want women to know that there's still, I mean, I still have orgasms. I still have great sex. I still have all the things. So even with all of that, and I was able to have a kid.
Cramps. Well, orgasms really can help with cramps.
Oh, they can help with everything. We've learned on the show too.
Yes.
Now
they
you
can
tell
help
me.
with a longer life. At least that's what my husband keeps telling me. So I'm like, okay. But I wanted to say too, I think a lot what I'm experiencing personally, and I can share this, is it's when I'm relaxed, when I know there's not going to be someone banging on the door. And it's interesting because now we're empty nesters, and you know what they say, when they're empty nesters, you'll have sex on the kitchen table. And it's like, what was funny, and
your kids are like,
we didn't have sex on the kitchen table yet. But last night we were watching a movie, and I was so uncomfortable and I was hot. I took off my shirt and I was sitting there watching the movie topless. And my husband looked at me, he goes, what the hell? What are you doing? I'm like, this is actually not a sexual thing. I'm literally hot and uncomfortable. I wrapped a blanket around me, and I'm like, I can do this. There's no one else here that's going to walk in. And it's the same with sex, leave the doors open, walk around. So I think a lot of sexual, I don't know, I want to know what you think, like, is relaxing and being comfortable in your body and being comfortable in your space, knowing there won't be intrusion.
There's so much into I mean, again, when we're 22, we're just like walking hormones, right? It's just easy to access that. But as we get older, and like Camille said, like, busy, you're raising families, you got a job, it's hard to tap into that energy, because sex is pleasure. And what's your relationship to pleasure and relaxation? If you're a go, sex isn't usually top of mind because it's kind of an option. So shifting into that more erotic mindset sometimes takes some energy, especially for women. There's a great book that I love called Come As You Are. And she talks about accelerators and brakes. And I just love that. I use that quite a bit with folks in sex therapy, because it's the idea, most of us know our brakes, like, we're tired, or, we have our period, or whatever, the kids are home, or there's just all these things that are like, no, those are the no's. Those are the things that make you no. But what are the yeses? Like, what are the accelerators? What are the things that not just directly turn you on, but that like prime you to be in a more sensual headspace? So understanding those are kind of what I think is helpful to cultivate. Maybe it's being rested, or for some people it's after exercise, or love, like smell can be a big thing for women if they have a really lovely like oil that they like to put on, or that's why sometimes stretching can sometimes sort of be erotic a little bit, or it's whatever, but knowing what those things are gives you a pathway. And also, I will say, the more you do it, the more you want it. So I usually encourage women to start self-stimulation more frequently, because it'll ramp them up a little bit.
Somebody that was on the show previously, Dr. Edith Eger, happens to be somebody that I know personally. I don't know if you know who she is. She's phenomenal. And she keeps telling me to, she's mentioned before that having orgasms helps to prevent, helps to prevent Alzheimer's. Sorry. Yeah. That's what she's told me.
That was a commercial for that.
Michelle, sorry, I have to say.
I guess I'm not having enough.
You're not having enough orgasms.
That was really bad.
That was like perfect. The perfect sign.
And she's not. She's so cute. She's 94 years old or something, right? And she is.
She's 93. 3 or 4. She's a sexologist, and she's got her doctorate in psychology. She works a lot with people with PTSD and different things. She's a, major best-selling author, etc. But yeah, she's
do you
told me that.
agree? In fact, I wanted to ask, like, what are some sexual myths that are going around? Like, is that true in your opinion? We talked too about G-spot. We talked about before you and I talked just so many different things that
I don't know about the correlation between orgasm and Alzheimer's. I have not read that, so I can't verify that. Gosh, what are other myths?
Well, can all women have orgasms through sexual intercourse? I know that.
No.
Right.
No.
Like, many.
Yeah. So know how you can orgasm, because actually way more women can have orgasms clitorally than through penetrative sex. Newsflash to the men, right? Because they're like, wait, what? Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have foreplay, or that's why it's interesting to me that some men feel kind of put off or sidelined if the woman is touching herself, or if she wants a vibrator at the same time as penetration. It's just what works. It's just knowing what works in your body, and there's no shame. However you can do it is what I say. I think it's fine, but a lot of women, like I can do it either way, but a lot of women, it's one or the other, and thankfully it's something. For some women, yes, there's some women that just are not orgasmic. I tend to think, orgasms are really just a muscle spasm, so it's not like this secret little box that we have in there. It's a muscle spasm, and that's why with a vibrator, it's involuntary. It's an involuntary spasm that will occur, So usually it's more of a, I find that it's just lack of awareness and mind-body connection if no orgasm is happening.
And what about G-spot?
The G-spot is real. But I don't know. I don't know that it's this big quest, and I don't think it feels great to everybody,
Mm-hmm. Do you guys know of any other myths or that you want to question that you've heard?
I know for myself, I love pink. And I think sometimes people think that this whole new gender expression in trans world, like it's an attack on women that are born women as opposed to those that are trans women. And I would love if you would kind of bridge that, or maybe even explain more how we can be of an ally to each other instead of, well, I'm a born female as opposed to, or whatever the language is between that.
Yeah, I have been mindful in my last few, over the last 2 months, I think, since the Equality Act has been, up in the ether, to be inclusive. Women, I feel like women are kind of like Democrats, where there's just we need to come together and we need to all support each other. We don't need friendly fire. And I think that a trans woman is a woman, and I think she should be included and welcomed to the table. I just think there's enough room. And I feel like this in general, like I want to rise with other women. I think that's really important. And I think that we can it's like, ultimately it's a function of patriarchy, keeping women down, but it's something that we execute amongst one another in this way that doesn't help. And so I like bringing all women to the table and helping. I think it's important. And right now, trans folks in general need allies, because they're such a small fraction of the population, and they're pretty fragile at this point. And so they need us.
I agree. Any other questions, guys?
We've covered a lot.
Yeah. Or Jen, is there any other areas you'd like us to cover?
We covered a lot,
right? We covered a lot. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today. We certainly covered a lot of everything that you help, that you work with. how can individuals who are listening and watching contact you if they would like some therapy or even just some advice?
Sure. So I'm only licensed in California, so I'll give that caveat. But you can find me on Instagram at Riviera_therapy. Yeah, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram at that address, and kind of be on the lookout. Going forward, I'll probably be doing more lectures and speaking and writing and retreats and that kind of thing. So yeah,
Well,
thanks for having
we
me.
so appreciate your vulnerability, everyone here. Michelle, you're going to have to go. That was pretty funny. But
You better show me the episode before you air it.
But I think that having these conversations are really important for people to understand about their own sexuality, about their partner, about the world. And the main thing is really loving yourself. In my opinion, loving yourself, getting to know your body, getting to know what you and your partner, whether it's the same sex or opposite, love about each other, intimacy, sensuality, and support and empowerment, like you said at the end, Jen, like just really supporting each other in all of the choices that we make. And if we can tap into that part of our goddess, and even just by taking little steps, I think that's such an accomplishment. So thank you so much again for joining us on Grateful Goddesses.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good topic, good discussion.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
Welcome, everyone, to Favorite Things, or otherwise known as our adult show and tell, where we talk about and share all of the different products or rituals or anything that brings you joy and happiness. We are with our guest, Jenn Kennedy, and we're going to go around and share. For me, this is actually become a favorite activity, and it was expressed by another featured goddess, Rachel, on our episode with Cheryl Sloan. She talked about pelvic floor therapy, and she recommended a woman here, a therapist, PT therapist here in Chicago. And it took months to get into her, and now I know why. I go to her. I was told I needed pelvic floor therapy, and I went where they did they inserted a rod, and it was biofeedback, and it showed, when you clench and you release, and it showed how long you clench for, etc. I didn't find it helpful. So this type of pelvic floor therapy, because I guess there's all different kinds, this kind, she actually inserts her finger and she presses, releases, presses, kind of like a clock. She goes around to all the areas. Let me tell you, after the first one, she stopped and she said, "So how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, let's just get out a cigarette." Because I felt like we had just had sex. No, I mean, it was painful. I will say it was painful, but it was like a good pain. Like it was like when you're building a muscle, that pain feeling you feel after you work out, you know that it's good for you. So now I've been going, oh my gosh, like 6 or 7 times now. And I cross my fingers. I haven't peed in my pants yet since then. And our sex is better. I mean, he doesn't always want me to discuss personal things, but I have to tell you, I have more control down there. So I feel it more, and we can just enjoy so much more. But my pelvic floor is definitely stronger, and I highly recommend. It's like the best kept secret, I feel, for women, and it's really important to try and go do. Michelle, what did you bring today?
Okay, so we were talking earlier about loving ourselves and that being a big part. I think just in general in life, I'm going to cover some of this, but this here is me. I did a boudoir photo shoot. And I did it because I have a dear friend whose sister is a professional photographer, and that's what she does. Her business is Boudoir by Nomi, Nomi, and she's phenomenal. And so I went to her, and I never felt more joy. And I think the reason why I love that picture in general is because I see the joy, and I remember the experience and the joy that I felt. I may or may not have been a little tipsy when I did it, but I look at it, I actually had it blown up, and it's, there's a big black and white version on my wall in my room that I just got framed. And I'm slightly still a little uncomfortable with it because it's sizable, but it just, for me, represents my power and my strength and my beauty and my sensuality and my joy. And so it was one of the most freeing experiences I've ever had. And especially on this new journey of my life, or in my life, it's my favorite thing today.
I remember when you did it and you were scared. You were scared to go do it.
Terrified.
And then she did it, and she just, your whole, I felt your whole spirit lifted. Like it just was so incredible of a, activity that you did. So that's so great that you shared it. Thank you for sharing. Camille, what did you bring today?
I'm going to give you a hint. Nope, you guys have a sick mind. It's for my eyes.
You heard it and I was like, oh. Don't react.
So it's my nurse Jamie eye thing, because I haven't been sleeping, right? So it keeps me from having I always have to take the battery out because it's so loud, and my husband's always like, what are you doing? 20 years ago. I'm like, dude, it's allergy season. So for all of you guys who have I used to be an esthetician, so I feel like I have to bring my little my things that work for me. So it helps with now I'm about to say hyaluronic acid. No, it helps with lymphatic drainage. So as far as like just getting some of that swelling down that you may experience, like I even go and use it around my eustachian tubes for like when it's all swollen and you're feeling all the, the nasally, and you'll hear it soon, Karen. I'll sound a lot more masculine very soon. Speaking of gender roles, but that's you
have a lot of buzzing electronic vibration, vibrating.
Funny, none of them work for down there because I don't use one. I haven't since I met my husband. I haven't. Yeah. I don't know. And maybe I should have asked this, but being an esthetician, and I used to do Brazilians all the time, and I would tell women all the time, like, the more you get it done, the less sensitive it'll be. And it started I started realizing, like, wait, that's not a place I want to lose sensitivity. So even for myself, I stopped waxing there. I stopped using vibrators because I didn't want to be, I didn't want only a machine to be able to turn me on, or not that I had an addiction yet. But at the same time, it's hard to replicate a machine in a human and expect that same result. And like, I'll just go, my husband wouldn't care if I shared this, but with him, it was almost like a video game with him in a way. Like, he's like, it's my goal to see if I can make you first, like if I can't, he feels like a failure. And I'm like, go with that. Feel the shame.
Well, it's so interesting. It's so interesting that you say that about, cause I read that. I use a vibrator. I love it. It's great. It helps with our relationship tremendously. But there are times when I wonder, and Kim, maybe you can, Kim, that was our guest yesterday. I'm sorry, Jen. Jen, maybe you can answer this, is that can your body get so used to that it can't orgasm other ways? Like if you kind of overuse it?
Yes, for sure.
Yes. Oh no. How can you backpedal? How can you backpedal?
Don't get dependent on it. Yeah, because think about it. I mean, it vibrates. You can't replicate that as a human, and it's different. So it's a little bit of a shortcut. So I think it's good to use, if you're going to use it in combination. Don't use it as a standalone too much, because it's just different. So you will habituate, just like anything else. It's like sometimes these guys that are masturbating all the time, they habituate to their hand, and you can't replicate that, as a partner. So I tell them, back off and just, the body resets. It's okay.
Right. The body.
Karen's like, don't take away my vibrator.
No. Well, no, we use it in combination, which is great. But I have to say too, I have daughters, and I'm always like wanting to tell them, like, I know, I'm like, they're young adults, and I want to tell them go get a vibrator, but like I just can't. But I wish I knew earlier.
You just did.
Oh yeah, I just did. Girls. Oh no. But not to overuse it. But I want Camille's dying. But I want women out there to know, like, just about pleasure, and you can do this, and it's just, I think I was watching Bridgerton. And if you watch that,
That'll do it.
Yeah. Who needs a vibrator with Bridgerton?
Right. But he said to her, I don't know if you saw it, and he said, go touch yourself down there. And I was like, what? And it was great because, yeah, it was great. Because
and so Karen did.
No, I mean, I think it helped inspire a lot of women. Like, you can have this pleasure too. It's not just about the guy. So Jenn, what did you bring today after all of our interesting show and tell items?
I went simple, kind of basic. My tea is my friend. I have a bunch of pretty glasses. I have a bunch of really nice teas in the office. I switched away from coffee years ago. I can't do caffeine anymore, but yeah, it just feels sort of grounding and nurturing to me. It's cozy. I especially do it all winter long. And yeah, it just feels like a nice little way to take care of myself. And as I'm taking in a lot of energy, I've got, kind of this thing that just feels good. So
I was going to say, you must be, as all therapists, you need to kind of create a boundary or a shield, because you are taking in a lot, I could imagine, and you need to kind of regroup and recharge.
Yeah, I don't think of it so much as a shield. It's interesting because I do take a lot of energy in all day long, but I have to counterbalance it with lots and lots of self-care.
Which is important for everyone.
Exercise, friends,
I was going to say, tell us before we go, what are your self-care? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't usually start working until 11 because I work until 7. I see a lot of couples, and afternoon appointments are sort of the preference for them. So I spend my mornings, kind of easing into the day with my spouse and getting some exercise, and definitely friend time. That's all, like, I have to do that. Otherwise I can feel myself kind of getting edgy, and feeling, it's just, energetically, I have to be able to hold a lot. And so that just requires that care. I do yoga, I hike, I walk with a friend every week, I spin. Yeah.
That's that. We all need self-care. And people who are watching or listening, you may want to go grab a cup of tea. You may want to go vibrate an area of your body. You may want to go out and get the boudoir photo, frame it, put it on your wall, and go check out a PT, a pelvic floor therapist. If you are having pelvic floor issues, I highly recommend. So thank you again for joining us, Jenn, on Grateful Goddesses.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jenn.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.